Welcome back. The festive season is around the corner, and this means more people will be traveling to destinations around the country and abroad. SA is open for travel, but visa challenges could affect the country's economy and tourism. Let's unpack this now with the economist Ndumiso Hadebe, who joins us now. Ndumiso, thank you so much for your time, as always, and a very good morning to you. Let's talk a little bit about the significant impact that visa restrictions may have on, never mind the economic value, but also I always believe in the experiential value of travel, where South Africa is concerned.
Good morning, Faith. Indeed, I think visa regulations are quite important, as you've quite rightly mentioned, not only on the economic prospects of countries in different regions, but I guess various experiences and the potential friendships that are built by peoples all around the world. And I guess particularly when it comes to international relations and also trade relations, visa regulations are quite important in either enhancing that or rather creating certain constraints and limitations where that is concerned.
Yeah.
And in the South African context, it's particularly important, given the nature and structure of the South African economy, to pay a particular focus as to what are the potential opportunities that lie when it comes to visa regulations in particular.
I do note that it was a Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, that actually made a very interesting note that the list of countries that are able to enter South Africa visa-free has been largely unchanged since 1992. Right? That in itself says that a lot of work needs to be done in order for us to actually do a practical calculation of the economic value of just opening up. I don't understand why is it that we have a conversation about an Africa free trade agreement on one side, but we can't equally have another conversation on the other side about visa-free travel if we truly are to realize this economic potential.
Indeed, you spot on, Faith. The visa regulations could be associated or coupled with what is then termed as some of the non-tariff barriers when it comes to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Over and above reducing or removing tariff barriers in terms of the facilitation of trade and investment promotion, there are other issues such as the potential constraints that are associated with visa regulations, particularly with countries and regions that are quite strategic for the economic growth potential of the South African economy. Specifically, when we are looking at visa regulations in the context of the promotion of trade, of communication, of capital, and of course the movement of people, where South Africa and of course the African continent can be able to benefit from mutually in order to drive a sustainable and mutual growth and development in the long term.
You know, you have to go into the role of lobbyists in being able to ensure that such, for example, status quo, such as not even changing the visa or how many countries are allowed visa-free in this country, it should have been an initiative that's been taken on by lobbyists, especially lobbyists within the tourism sector. That's the only way that we're going to get the inflow of money into our economy, especially post-pandemic, for the purpose of recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. But I wonder, where are these players and stakeholders when it comes to lobbying the very same thing? Is it that much of a bureaucratic exercise to get more countries added onto the visa-free list as we'd anticipated, or is it just sheer oversight, really, from a government's perspective?
So I think based on the evidence, we are able to clearly see the very practical opportunities and, of course, the benefits that come with the relaxation of certain visa regulations, particularly with regions and countries where it's quite strategic for the South African economy, but also the African continent to do so. And I think in terms of lobbying efforts and advocacy efforts, there have been some illustrations of work that has been done in the tourism sector to advance this particular discourse, particularly in a post-COVID-19 era where tourism serves as a very almost an easier route to be able to drive sustainable growth and the recovery program of the South African economy. And institutes and institutions such as South African Tourism and, of course, the Department of Tourism as well are quite important in being able to facilitate this. Of course, again, Faith, being able to balance it as well against some of the sovereign security concerns that are associated with a globalized world, as we've seen quite recently, some of the opportunists from around the world that may see an opportunity in a relaxation of certain visa trade regulations from a security point of view. It needs to be balanced against those, but certainly when it comes to the economic prospects, that lobbying effort certainly needs to be accelerated to ensure that the economic benefits are also able to benefit developing countries such as South Africa and, of course, regions such as the African continent. The flow of capital, Faith, and the flow and the movement of people and of knowledge and communication is quite critical for an economy such as South Africa that is knowledge intensive and services based. And in essence, what that certainly means is that if you are an individual who does not play in the sector that is either knowledge intensive in the area of professional services or services based, such as the tourism sector, it means you're potentially locked out of being economically active in the South African economy. Now, when you have an opportunity where the tourism sector has high employment multiplier growth, such as in the context of South Africa, it then presents opportunities for low and medium skilled individuals in the South African economy, which form a bulk of the South African population, to then have access to economic opportunities, and thus also addressing some of the social security concerns that also reside in the South African context.
Yeah, the security conversation is one that we can never have too lightly. But on the other side of it, let's flip the coin a little bit, and Dumiso, and speak about how about 105 countries that we can travel to as South Africans which do not require a visa. So it's about 105 countries or so where we can be actually visa-free. That means that on our side as well, there's still a lot of work to do to be able to even have those kinds of memorandums of agreement that allow South Africans to travel aboard. But what kind of stops it? What considerations are often made to this type of decisions to say, listen, party or country A may now be able to travel to country B without the need of a visa? I'm just trying to find a way of us extending beyond 105, and hopefully the next time we have a conversation, we're sitting at a good 210.
Indeed. So I think, as we've mentioned before, oftentimes such deliberations, whether it be at a bilateral or multilateral trade agreement point of view, is indeed offset against some security considerations. I think that is almost common cause. But as well, countries also consider what would that mean in terms of the flow of capital, what it would mean in terms of the flow of intellectual property, skills transfer that would be mutually beneficial, but also facilitating trade corridors in a more sustainable and effective manner, given that country X and country Y might benefit mutually from a trade point of view. And all of that is then simulated in a manner that would make certainly coherent and strategic sense from an international relations policy standpoint, but of course from a trade standpoint as well, in terms of what would that mean in terms of greater prospects. And this is certainly quite important, Faith, to be able to increase that number, particularly where there are strategic opportunities that lie there, because we've seen some of the positive effects of trade or trade openness for a small open economy such as South Africa that has benefited quite significantly from its openness with the international community, and also driving accelerated modernization and, of course, the much required advancements of the South African economy going forward. But also what that means is that by increasing that, it also increases the opportunity for increased sharing of knowledge and knowledge management. And we would know that in particular when we're faced with the fourth industrial revolution and the opportunities that come in there with automation in certain industries and the effects that it has, but as well the opportunities that lie in there, it becomes quite critical in order to ensure that South Africa and the African continent continues to be at the frontier of global growth and, of course, development as well.
Dumiso, we'll leave it here for now. Thank you very much for your time, as always, economist and Dumiso Hadebe. But just speak a little bit about some of these visa constraints, as well as the impact that it does have on tourism.